Thank you for coming. This is a special program for our members, and we've got a friend and a very familiar woman that comes to the museum frequently and often, and that's Lily Hope from Juneau. My name is Kathleen Marquardt. I'm Tlingit and Haida from Wrangell, Alaska. I'm Vice President of the Native American Council. And I'd like to thank all the members for coming, and would like to thank all the new members for joining and being part of the program. Lily's going to talk about her special talent and what she's done and how she's learned from her mother and all the teachers. And the thing about all the artists that I've met is they want to share. They want to teach all of us and everyone who wants to learn. And so we're going to learn Lily's journey, where she started and where she is today and as she continues. So I'm going to turn it over to her, and maybe she'll give me the baby. So when you need it.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. Thank you to Patty and to Kathleen for coordinating this and hosting me. I'm so happy to be here again. I think this is my third or fourth trip to Portland this year. And when we landed the first time, I said, if there's one other place I could live, I think it's Portland. I think this is it. So it was pretty fabulous. I didn't know what I was getting into when Mike Morawski came and picked up the robe in May of last year. And about a month later, he said, "You know, our exhibit in the Center for Contemporary Native Art is closing. Would you like to put one together previous to the large exhibit that's going to be put on? You know, the Resilience exhibition with all of the works from my robe, my mother's robe, Jenny's robe, and Jenny's teacher, Clara or Cora Benson. We're still like back and forth about who she really is. So the Portland Art Museum is unique that they have 4 large pieces, Chilkat weavings, from a traceable lineage of teacher weavers. And that's so we wanted to kind of highlight that in this exhibit. Not so much all 4 of us teacher weavers, but that this is a vibrant art form that is still being practiced today. Even though, you know, even in like the early 80s, there were just a couple people weaving Chilkat robes. And sorry, I didn't introduce this person who's on my little appendage here. This is Anastasia Clarissa, named after my late mother, and she is 6 months. So if she gets a little energetic, she may go on a walk with any of you who might want to carry her around. No, my auntie Deanna is in the audience, so she can certainly walk around. Thank you again. I'm so grateful to Mike Morawski for having me, for asking me to help put this together. I had no idea how far it would reach or how many people it would touch. I've had many people reach out to me and say, "When are you teaching? When are you coming back? You know, I want to learn this. Who, you know, what else can we do?" So it's really been heartening. And I'm standing in front of the Weavers Across the Waters robe. This one is the work of about 55 weavers, some who are in this audience today. And people ask me, you know, they've seen it a few times and they say, "Oh, you wove that?" And I said, no, these squares were all woven by individual weavers. And not a single person got paid to do this work. So we all either spun our own warp or purchased a little kit to put these together. And in the Chilkat warp, there is cedar bark, either red or yellow cedar, spun into that warp. And then the goal was to weave a 5x5 square. Well, if you've ever done any textile, trying to get an exact 5-inch by 5-inch weaving is pretty impossible. So when my mother had about 43 of these assembled, or, you know, all in one place, she messaged and she put it out on Facebook and she said, "I don't know how I'm going to fit these like 4 by 2.5 inch and 5.21 inches and all these kind of things together into a tapestry." So one of her weavers, actually one of her students, had a boyfriend who was engineering minded, and he came down and labeled each one and measured each one and put A, B, C, D, E, F, G and charted it out for her so that she could assemble it without being too wobbly on her. So it's a testament to the work that no one got paid. I mean, the spirit in these textiles, that no one got any monetary gain from this, and that it seemed that it always came together. You know, the people who needed to come together always assembled right when it needed to be, you know, further progressed. So anyway, what else am I supposed to say? Oh yes. So how many of you know the difference between Chilkat and Ravenstail weaving? Hey, I'm impressed. That's like half of you. So on the simplest form, Chilkat weaving, one has usually the black and white, and a turquoise and yellow or a green and yellow in it. And this robe over here is unique in that it has both the ancient green and yellow and a turquoise and yellow. Usually you'll not see both of those greenish blues in the same robe. Like when you look at another one, it'll be either the blue and yellow or green and yellow, but not always this, with a combination. So if you look closely at this robe, this is a robe within a robe design. You can see there's a smaller yellow border in there, and that's symbolic of the the older color. So that green was, 500 years ago green. And it was intentional and accidental that the center small Chilkat face there, the smaller face in the center, I wove that in turquoise first, thinking I would make the entire thing turquoise and yellow, and then realized I had a half a ball of that turquoise blue left, and that the face came out too wide and too square and it was not what it should have been. So I took the entire face back to the eyebrows. That whole green mask was turquoise. So rewove that. And we do that a lot, and we call that we learned a lot that day. Right? I only took out 30 hours of work and put it back in. So it's pretty, it's very labor intensive. In fact, I did bring you an example. Can I show you an example of what a weaving looks like in progress? You don't get to see that much, right? Okay, let's see. Here we go, all professionally wrapped in a baby blanket here. Sure. Can we hold this one? We'll see what she does. Oh, she's gonna go walk around. Oh. So here we go. This is, I did a Chilkat face class this fall, and we thought we'd get together for about one weekend a month, and we'd weave some faces. Well, this was fashioned after the apprenticeship that my mother did with Jenny in 1986, and my mother and Jenny spent 6 weeks together, 5 and 6 days a week. So doing the math on that, I remember going to Jenny's house after school, and my mother was still there until 5 o'clock, so I'd sit on the swing, or I'd eat some fry bread, or I'd just sit at her feet. I was 7 at that time, or 6 actually. And so my mother and Jenny wove a Chilkat face together, and they were slated to be leggings. We wear them as dance regalia. But my mother spent over 260 hours with Jenny. So me thinking that we'd spend 4 months together and 5 or 6 hours on the weekend, there was no way we were going to finish a full face. So we started meeting 3 times a month. And we still got only this far. And I only got this far because I was helping 18 other people make progress on their faces. And I have 5 children. So I'm already losing sleep. And so I dream of when I can lose sleep for my weavings instead of my children needing sleep as well. Anyway, so this is, I affectionately call him my Oscar the Grouch Chilkat face. I did a side-by-side photo, and he very much looks like Oscar the Grouch. This is hand-dyed green from a spinner dyer up in Juneau, and this yellow was actually dyed by my mother, Clarissa. So, and in the top here, this is a Ravenstail pattern that's been slightly modified. So the geometric in the very top border here, that is Ravenstail. And our Ravenstail patterns, you can see a few of the robes here. This is Terry Rothkar's back here. But our patterns come off of the basketry and nature that we find in Southeast Alaska, down the coast of the Pacific Northwest. So that kind of, I didn't actually talk about the shapes, though, in Chilkat weaving. That so the shapes in Chilkat weaving are very different, obviously, than these geometric shapes. We get the Chilkat face, which is iconic of not just human form, but can be the anamorphic form of any animal spirit, right? So this human-like characteristics, or like a spirit that we might know of in an animal. So when we see a diving whale like this one back here, I think that's a diving whale. I want to say that it is. And he's, there's a face in there that is the being's spirit in there, symbolized by the face. And we also modify our form line design from the Northwest Coast to make it weavable on a Chilkat robe. And because if we try and take the panels, the house screens, and the bentwood boxes, and take those designs and put them into textile, either you will spend 6,000 hours making a teeny tiny piece, or you will go mad, or something of the sort. It's so intense, having all of these colors moving and trying to shape these little lines, bringing them around. One of my favorite weavers is William White right here, and he's got a few students. This is one of his students here. And William White, you can see like the difference here between this face and this one is not just his warp is a lot thinner, right? So I've got a thicker warp going on, but he's weaving with yarns that are almost the size of dental floss. So he's able to make this little nose is probably only, 12 warps wide, and this one is 22, So he's got, the finer yarns give you that capability to make teeny tiny shapes, but he's still not pulling it right off of a bentwood box. There is another weaver in Canada. Her name is Megan O'Brien. You can follow her on Instagram. She has woven a few pieces where she literally did pull it off of a bentwood box, but I'm telling you, the weavings are like this big, and they took her a long time. And she's got little tiny fine lines, and also weaving in like lace weight or dental floss thin threads. So I guess that's really what you're into and what you want to spend your time doing. So it is possible to do that. Yes.
I'm curious to know how they came up with all the different designs. Are they their own making of the designs, or did they actually look at the boxes and
Great.
so forth and come up with all these different ones?
Great question. So in this robe, we call this the Weavers Across the Waters robe because it comes all the way down here to Oregon and all the way up the coast into Canada. And these weavers do come across the waters, right? The meaning or the intent of this robe is that it will live at the Evergreen College Longhouse building and in their weaving studio. So it's going up to Laura Grabhorn up there. And it will come out and travel, we're hoping, with any weaver that contributed to this for any time a dugout canoe makes its maiden voyage on the waters. So Weavers Across the Waters, twofold meaning of, we are across the waters and hopefully this will move across the waters. So design though, we thought of like the themes in water, right? You can see many of those pieces in here. So we've got the little bubbles from, the whale bubbles coming up. We've got the killer whale fin. We have this is actually a replica, a piece from like zooming in, like, on an older robe. So that's a bear claw here. We could almost imagine that the bear could be reaching in and grabbing a fish, out of the water. This is a traditional Ravenstail design called Bunchberry. This is also in our pattern books. I'm not sure the name of this one. Do you know the name of that one, John? So this is a version of the lightning design coming down. So these are traditional Ravenstail patterns. So we didn't put a limit on what they could or could not do. This is like the sunset on the coast of the water. You've got the beach and then the sun setting here. We've got a tiny little Chilkat face under there. This one was a woman who, she's from Canada also, and she just loved this is actually called Returning Salmon, this design here, and she wanted to do a pop of red, so she contributed that. She's a new weaver. This one, let's see, this is my sister's piece, but she was so dissatisfied with her first square. You can see that it kind of bows out on the side. And she said, oh no, I can't let that be my only contribution. So she had to go and weave this one, which is a little bit more square and precise. Anyway, and that was at the point where we were like, oh my gosh, we had 60 weavers and only 40 of them have sent their things in. What are we going to do? How are we going to finish this? So my sister said, okay, I'll make another one. And so this one, I think this is one of my favorites. This is Shken George. She's living in Angoon, Alaska now, but she's got a couple girls, and she's been Chilkat weaving with my mom for probably 15, maybe 20 years, long time. And she said, well, can't you see that that's the reflection of the ocean in our eyes? So really beautiful designs. And we have big dreams that someday we'll put together a booklet of all the patterns that we did, right? That we'll have photos of each weaver with their weaving and then actually chart them out, because this was an inspiration of the clan house / snail. Since I'm from the snail house, this is the weaving that I did, and it's kind of that spiraling, coming down into the center where the fire pit is in a clan house. And so that's that. And this, oh, this is so cool. This border here, we don't usually do a colored border and a yellow with so much going on in the border. And this is called the Haida spiderweb design, which is, happening here. This is usually black on black and then white on white or yellow on yellow in the traditional method. But when my mom saw that she had all these random colors still left and not really, that whole half an ounce left over thing, she came and she said, well, let's variegate it and let's see what happens. And it turned out amazing, So right before we put this in the exhibit here, we noticed that there isn't, you see these braids here happening? These braids weren't happening between here, which we're like, what was that? I mean, was that intentional? Da, da, da. So we had to go back to my mother's blog, of course, because she can't answer us from in the ethereal realm. And we said, well, what did she mean by not putting braids in there? Because that's supposed to be a defining line between the colors. And she said, well, we're going to put mother of pearl buttons in there. I said, oh, good. I'm glad we have some with us. So we put buttons along there. And it's, I just can't speak enough to the awesomeness of what this represents in Ravenstail and Chilkat, that we're still here. We're still here. The weavers in the room, raise your hand if you're one of the weavers. This is Stephanie and John, and I think, is Joni here? You were about to, yes, Joni helped us finish this at the very end. That's right, she did. So the, John has a square in here. Let's see if I can, this one right here. This is John Beard. And yeah, the sea urchin, we laughed when we got this one. We were like, what is that little alien guy? And we asked the weaver and she said, oh, that's a sea urchin, don't you know? So the fun part, now I know this is an exhibit, shh, I'm touching it only because I'm gonna show you, but look, underneath here, there's little names of all the weavers. So it says John Beard right under here. Let me grab this baby, hold on. Let's see, come here, let's see. Come here, girl. Come here, sad face. All right. And Stephanie's is? The three whales here? Oh, these guys. Yeah. So right there, we got Stephanie. Yeah, and a little spear on there. It's fabulous. It's so fabulous. So this is really cool because what's happening here is she has done an entire, like a little pictograph, right? Like a full-on happening going on in here, but in the Ravenstail style. Which means that between these colors, there's no braid. And if you look closely at Chilkat weavings, anytime there's white or blue or white and green between, touching each other, there will be a braid. But if you're skilled at Ravenstail, you can do this and do an entire picture like this without any braids in between, which saves you a lot of time. But I'm sure you had to yeah, right. You have to know the skills of how to twine them and switch their colors, because you have a black and white tied together to make this happen across here. And I don't know how you did that. Did you have 3 colors moving to make that black happen? So in here, this little line here, there had to be a couple places where you had all 3 colors together. Oh, or she'll never tell. She'll never tell. That's very sneaky. I'm about to lose this. Hold on, just a second. Adjusting. Okay, here we go. Yeah. So, it's so great. Oh yes, the coppers. This was you too, right? Yeah. So we had a little bit of extra white space in here. We were, the way that these borders, you can see that on other robes, the borders come down at this angle, but we didn't have a little, triangular-y kind of weaving to put in here. So we thought, well, Stephanie had the brilliant idea. She said, I'm going to make some tanas and bring them in and put them right here. So that's Stephanie's contribution to this one too, to kind of make it, put a little wealth in there, put a little pop. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which one did you do one of them? Did you do one of them?
Yes.
It's this one right here.
Excellent.
This is my mother's sister.
That's your brother, your uncle's boat on the water.
Who is also not with us. I didn't know that. Oh, weaving always brings up the emotions. Yes, question back here.
Can you talk about, do people learn to do both Ravenstail and Chilkat, or one or the other, and how, who does which, and how do you decide when you start to weave a robe what it's going to be?
Sure. Well, I'll answer the first one first. So Ravenstail weaving is more geometric. Chilkat weaving is more pulling imagery off of our panels or wood carvings, oftentimes depicting our clan crests. So we'll have the eagle, bear, eagle, killer whale robe. It's confusing. It's not a simple answer in how you decide which one you're going to learn. Sometimes it's what is available to you. If someone's offering a Ravenstail class, you're like, I'm going to take that. Sometimes it's that you're invited. A friend of mine was invited by my mother to learn to Chilkat weave. He had been carving and doing all the other Northwest Coast arts, and my mom said, I heard through the grapevine you might want to weave. Can you come and take this Chilkat weaving class? So he's been weaving Chilkat for as long as I have, actually. We started at the same time. And he wove this face here. That's Ricky Tagaban. And so he doesn't do a lot of the geometric Ravenstail stuff, very, very little. He says that his brain likes the flow and creative chaos of Chilkat weaving, because you're constantly weaving small pieces and attaching them and figuring out how to get that line to come around and all that. And so that's another part of it, is that once you find, if you get to weave both Chilkat and Ravenstail, your brain and yourself will kind of decide for you whether you prefer one or the other, or sometimes your hands will decide, and you'll go, I'm really not cut out for this Chilkat stuff, and you'll do Ravenstail. Because Ravenstail is very, we like to say mathematical, that it takes a lot of graphing and counting and figuring out, especially when you're bringing a pattern down like this. We spent 2 or 3 hours figuring out how to make this pattern match on both sides, because it's counted out, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 4, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 4. So not our traditional mathematics, but it very it makes your brain hurt sometimes, figuring all of that out. So Chilkat and Ravenstail, depending on where you are and who your teachers are, sometimes you'll find a teacher that won't teach you Chilkat weaving. And my mother was one of those. She was very selective on who she would teach the weaving to, the Chilkat weaving to, because there's a deep cultural connection to this art form, and a power greater than we even now understand. I equate it kind of like the Superman thing, or like being a superhero, that we have this energy that's greater than us moving through us, and we want to be very careful on whose hands that is put into. So we're selective on who we teach that to. Ravenstail weaving also came back to us without a master teacher. So there were the traditions and the taboos that we have that have been passed down from my mother and her teacher, Jenny. Those don't exist the same way in Ravenstail, in the geometric weaving, where we're not sure what their practices were. That I just learned, Dolores Churchill just gave a talk in Ketchikan last week. She just said, Jenny was the last artist she had ever met who truly practiced the fasting and abstinence when she was weaving. No kidding. And that in the morning time, before she'd get her kids ready, before she'd eat breakfast, she'd weave for 2 or 3 hours, 4 hours in her little closet, and she wouldn't have anything other than tea. And she was weaving during this time. So those practices in Chilkat weaving are still embodied in those of us who have followed Jenny's teachings, And in Ravenstail weaving, we don't have that same weight, I would say, that same heaviness that's in it. So Ravenstail has been very freely shared, and I'm very happy about that. We have John Beard, who's been weaving for 30, 40 years. No? 20 plus years, so a long time, just a couple decades. So John and I and my mother were at the Parallel Worlds Ainu and Northwest Coast Weaving exhibition at the Japanese Tea Garden. Am I remembering? And you were probably 3/4 done with that robe. Oh, that way down on this robe. And he said, oh, it takes me a couple hours to go from one side to the other. An hour, 2 hours, a little ways. It was a long, but it doesn't take him that long anymore, because when my mother and I saw him, we said, oh, we don't weave again until we show you how to do this, because the way that you hold your fingers, if you learn to crochet or knit, your teacher will teach you how to hold your knitting needles. Is that correct? So that you can make pretty good progress, right? So we had to sit with John and say, please let us show you the way that you can create more work, more beautiful pieces with this, holding your fingers just like this and flying across the other side of your robe. So now I think it's...
Well, the other part of that story is Parallel Worlds was in 2009.
Yes.
And that's when I was introduced to the fingering.
Yes.
It wasn't really until 2014
Oh.
that when I came down and spent a day with the apron apprentices and Carissa, that I've been trying to do it, but that was the day that I finally started to connect. And the most wonderful thing about that technique is that you do the same technique moving to the right and moving to the left.
Yes.
And
Yes.
what I had been taught was that you had to switch hands, hold with one, manipulate with the other, and that is horrible.
Yes.
To move the other direction.
Yes, because your brain has to switch, like which one is yes. So whichever direction you're putting your hands in the warp this way, this guy is kind of the like flipper, like he kind of flips things back and forth, and this one is the twiner. It does this, right? And it does that action both this way and that way, just like John was saying. And that is revolutionary to making good progress. And if a robe might take you 4,000 hours the first time, once you have this twining, it might take you 1,500. Like it really, my mother would say it cuts your work in half once you can get this twining technique. Hold your hands just right. Or as my grandmother would say, you got to hold your tongue just right. She always, when she was doing something very precise, she'd stick her little tongue out. And if you hold it just right, it'll be just right. Yeah. So yes. So. Did I answer that question? The two different styles. How? Okay, thank you. Yes.
How much of the difference between Ravenstail and Chinook is in the pattern, and how much is in the actual weaving procedure?
Oh, very good question. So he said, how much of a difference is it between the patterns themselves in the two styles of weaving and the technique that is used to twine them? Is that correct? So Chilkat weaving has pretty much two basic things that happen. There is the horizontal twining that happens, and that's with a two-strand. So you just go back and forth with a color. And then in between that twining that's happening, every time there's a color change, there'll be a 3-strand braid. So there'll be a braid of the color that there is above and a braid of the black that it's going into, okay? So those are the two things that happen in Chilkat weaving. And in Chilkat, you won't... Traditionally, you will not tie two colors together, like a black and white, unless you're making teeth. That's the one place that you'll tie a black and white together, and they'll move horizontally because you're flipping as you twine to the back. Your black goes to the back, and white is shown in that. So that is the technique that is primarily used in a Ravenstail, because as you see, you have the black and white changing, and there's no braid happening in between here. If you touch this, it's flush. There's no pop of braids. So. Let's see. So in Ravenstail weaving, you have those two colors tied together that's moving. And this is deceptive also, that there's this yellow line happening. So you'd think that the weaver had to tie a yellow, a white, and a black together. Not so. The yellow is the substitute for the white in here. So in all of these other instances, there would just be yellow and yellow. If in all the other instances, there'd be the white and black together. Oh, grabby. Black and white are tied together and twining across here, but in these little instances right here where the yellow pops, that is a yellow and a black that are traveling together. So our eye says, oh, they were pretty sneaky putting all three of those colors in, but really the weaver was only using the black and the yellow. So in Ravenstail weaving, I think there's 11 or 13 different techniques on twining across. Like there's a rigid weft twine. There is these concentric shapes, the shapes within a shape that happen in the Ravenstail. There is spiral weft that comes down vertically on the borders. That is another technique that doesn't happen in Chilkat weaving. So Ravenstail is far more complex in like all of the techniques that you have to know to be able to assemble a Ravenstail robe. But a Chilkat robe is more complex in that you have to kind of hold your template up or measure constantly of where does this shape come next and how do I join these two together and all of that. So does that kind of answer? Let's see. But I would say that the majority of them, they are woven similarly in that you can use the same hand, the way you hold your hands is very similar in both. That you can translate that back and forth. And the biggest difference, I would say, is that, well, not biggest, but in Ravenstail, you start on the left side and you weave all the way over to the right side of the robe, and then you take a new strand and you start on the left side and you weave all the way to the other side and tie it off. So every time you start and then you end. And in a Chilkat robe, you tie 5-6 yards together, and you have just one weaver strand that's about 6 yards long. You make little slip knots. Did I make any on here? You shorten your lengths of your strands by little slip knots like this so they don't tangle, right? So you have these little loops made, and sometimes you can have probably 20 loops hanging on here so that you only have a little bit of length hanging. And you'll weave all the way across and turn around and come back and weave all the way across and turn all the way and go back the other way, all the way across. So in Ravenstail, the fringe that you see hanging on the left and right sides of the robe are the ends of those weavers. And in a Chilkat blanket, the fringe that you see on the left and right side has been added at the very end because their weaver has gone all the way and gone back and forth in this dance.
And the Ravenstail tends to be more geometric.
Yes, Ravenstail weaving is more geometric in design and mimics the basketry the basketry designs that we have, and the Chilkat robes are more formline. And you can see the realistic shapes like the fin of a whale. You can also see the imagery that we could pull off of our carved panels, carved boxes. Yes?
Have you had a chance to, because a lot of our Chilkat blankets are over in Russia.
What?
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of museums that have some of the oldest blankets. I was wondering if you ever had gotten a chance to go over and study some of those.
I haven't gone over there yet.
I was looking.
Not yet.
At the blankets and the history and where they are at, but some of they in Russia have some of the finest.
Oh my
I
goodness.
didn't know that until I was.
Oh wow. Yeah, let's go to Russia. Yes.
So Benny, when you're doing the Chilkat weaving, you're going from side to side, so you have to keep all those pattern pieces in mind.
Oh, thank you for asking that. That is another one that differentiates. So Ravenstail always go from left side to right side all the way across, and the progress of your robe always happens like straight down. So no matter where you are on a Ravenstail robe, you'll have the same amount of it woven all the way across, right? In a Chilkat blanket, kind of like what you see here, you can see that I can make progress over here on the side and weave just my green areas right here, and then just a little bit of green over here. So they're not making progress, all the way down on the same horizon line. And so, no, to answer your question, I don't have to weave this all at once, because that would be maddening, right? Because every single time there's a color change in here, they hook elbows. The turquoise comes across and hooks elbows with the black, and then it goes back its respective way, while the black goes back its way. And so in here, there are these awesome things made of sinew or like a waxed cotton string that are called drawstrings. Let me adjust this. It's about to fall off my ear. Hold on. Oh, and the baby's gonna fall off. Thank you so much for having little Anastasia with us, and tolerating the joy of this. Okay, here we go. So right here. Oh, thank you so much. Here we go. So in here, there's a little drawstring that happens every 4 stitches or so. There's like a little loop that happens behind here when I'm creating this panel. Okay, so I can weave from this side, and actually there's one in here. And I touch this, I'm going to bend it. I'm going to bend it for you. You can see that there's actually a join happening in here. There's a little drawstring, so I could weave this independent of this section, and then this section independent of all of that. And there's the fun part was there was no, I don't think there's a drawstring in between here. So all of this was woven all at once. And at this point, when I had the yellow going to black, going to all these braids, then all this, and then into here and into here and into here, I don't remember exactly how many color changes we had happening, but vertically, the braids that were coming down, I had over 160 strands of braids coming down all at once in this small area. And I said, don't make me weave another one of these. And then it came up that someone wanted another Chilkat robe, and I said, I can do that. Kind of like having kids, and you're like, oh, that childbirth was insane, right? I don't want to do that again. And then you're like, oh, I'm pregnant. Oh, I love being pregnant. Oh, this is so great. And you're like, wait, I have to birth this baby again? Same deal. So you're like in the midst of your Chilkat. In the midst of your Chilkat, your robe, you're like, oh my goodness, please don't make me do this again. This is so intense. But then you make it out of there, and you end up with these shapes, and you're like, that was so awesome, and look what came of it, and oh, let's do it again, you know? And on that, the similarity between growing children and making art that takes over a year to make these, right? So my mom used to equate that to, you're basically a surrogate. You know, you're growing this art, and then you're gifting it. You're giving it away. It's like I spent 9 months with this baby, and then here you go. You can take care of it for that. It's a really emotional experience. And she said she wove 11 robes in her lifetime, and she said with her last one, she finally got to have a full ceremony where she got to take it off of the loom and put the fur on and give it to its owner, to the buyer. And she said, there was so much joy in that, of like acknowledging that all the work that went into it and the look on the person's face, but publicly making that a public thing where she could say, it's free now. I can let this go with joy, And so she put that in my head before she passed. And so when we took this down, Mike actually came to, hi, Mike. He came up to Juno, and he was there for the cutting off the robe ceremony. And I mean, that was fully emotional. It was really, really emotional, especially, I started this robe when my mother was alive and had to finish it without her on this physical plane. So I spent a lot of time talking to the ethers. But pulling it off of the robe, and then the following day, I had to do all the final touches and put all this overlay fringe on and put these little rows in that keep the fringe from tangling when it gets danced, and putting the side fringe, all of this stuff, this gets added last. And thank goodness Mike's plane was late because I had never finished a robe before, and here we are at the last minute. We're like, holy smokes. My apprentice and I worked for like 9 hours each that last day before he took the robe, and I was like, oh my gosh. And when I handed it to him, there was no grief. You know what I mean? There was no like, I can't do this. It was all joy, because we'd already said goodbye. We'd already said, hey, this is where you're going to go live. This is who, people get to learn from you and all this. And then when he finally took it onto the plane, I said, what's next? What's next? It's really wonderful.
I think perhaps with that, we don't have to close right now.
Sure.
Maybe we'll have another question. And I'd like to get a few pictures up here with the weavers and
Sure.
Lily, and we also have refreshments downstairs.
Oh.
So journey back down there for coffee and cookies. But Liz,
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here and having me. And okay. Oh, yes, questions, yes.
I'm really intrigued circles that you get in
Sure.
your curve, because typically in weaving you don't get curves.
Yes.
So I was just wondering if you could just mention that's so interesting about Chilkat weaving.
That's kind of the funnest, that's not a word, but it's the most fun part about Chilkat weaving is that we are the only textile in the world where you can weave a perfect circle. I mean, any other textile that's, held at both ends, if you want to do a shape like that, there's always some sort of spiral happening where you don't really get that perfect circle. And so that's a lot of the draw to Chilkat weaving, is that, aren't these fun? And as you're weaving them, you're like, oh, I made the most perfect circle, and then you weave the stuff underneath it and it skews it. And you're like, it was perfect when I wove it, I tell you, I swear it was. But it's so much fun and so satisfying and that's the other fun part, is that you're weaving the negative space. I mean, not negative, but you're weaving, so to create a circle, you're weaving this color, this blue color is going back and forth across the top, and then there'll be a weaver that goes like this on this side and a little bit on this side, so there's 2 different blue weavers happening, and then you'll put in your 3 braids, the blue braid, black braid, white braid, that curves the top of your circle. Then you'll put in your tiny little white weaver and go doot, 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 just right there. And then once you get to the very farthest out point on this, your blue will come across here, meet up with your white. They'll hook elbows. Your white will move across those 4, 6 warps, all across to here, and then hook onto the blue on this side. The blue moves over here, turns around. So just in that tiny area, there's so much happening. And we say that you have to finish your circle in 1 day, okay? If you really have all of this woven already and you insert your braids, you could weave a circle in about 45 minutes. If all of that is already shaped for you, like this part, this little area right here, about 40 minutes, maybe 45 minutes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so fun. Okay, thank you. I'll be here again at 5:30. Oh yes. Thank you so much. Thank you. Sure. If she will.